Today we're going to talk about simple objects in value. The essential question is, why are we practicing value on a cylinder, box, or bag? As you can see, there are Cornell notes that you could actually take with this. Again, it's always suggested to take some notes so that you remember certain things so you don't have to have the presentation open for every step of the process. The learning targets for this unit are: I understand the 5 value techniques and can apply them in a value scale in my sketchbook with strong craftsmanship, which means skill or neatness. I can apply the value techniques in a drawing of simple objects in value in my sketchbook with strong craftsmanship, so the drawing looks completely focused and that make the original outlines disappear. The simple object drawings will include a table edge and shadow to show where the objects are in space. As you can see, for the value requirements, you should have already created that value worksheet, which has the stepped and gradated values. Now we are going to move on to creating the cylinder and the box or bag in value. What you're trying to do is make those objects look 3D by adding different values to different parts of your drawing so that it looks like you could almost pick them up off the page. One of the things that you're going to need to do for this assignment and any farther drawing assignments is try to block in your drawing. What that means is you're going to have to actually take your pencil and free draw what you're doing rather than tracing. A lot of times I'll talk about using a math graph for this. This video of blocking in a drawing shows that a little bit. If we go to this next slide though, it kind of breaks down what the quadrants are when I'm talking about a math graph. So realistically, what you want to do is you want to break your paper into 4 quadrants. Here the sketchbook is cut off a little bit, which is why those lower quadrants are a little bit smaller. But what the person is trying to do is they're trying to recreate this thumbnail drawing on the larger paper. And on the right hand side you can actually see the finished blocked in drawing of those glasses as a still life. That happens to be a still life drawing that you're seeing on this example, but it would work with the cylinder, the box, the perspective drawing, and pretty much anything else that you want to draw in the future. Another thing that you can do to draw more accurately is use a grid. When we do things that are more complicated, like the perspective drawing or the still life drawing, you could use a grid to block your shapes in as well if you wanted to. And again, there's a video right here that will show you how to do that, which we'll include in the later units as well. Other videos that you can use for value, you can see we have the stepped value scale here. We also have the cylinder value video and the box value video. The bag value video should be in the module in Canvas. Remember, as you are creating your drawings, you want to take process photos along the way. What I want you to notice about this image is there's a really good process of the box before there was value on it, but this particular person didn't take very good photos as they were drawing their cylinder. So it's really important to take a partial blocked in or a little bit of value as a process photo, and then obviously the finished value photo for your digital portfolio. So I'm thinking that we should talk about what we learned about drawing objects in your sketchbook during the last assignment. The other thing that I'm wondering is what you think about me giving you the steps for the cylinder and the box. Why do you think I'm doing that for you? If you said it's because I want all of you to succeed, you're right. When you try to measure the cylinder, if you're going to draw free-handed without using that quadrant system we talked about before, you want to measure the top or that ellipse that's on the top of the cylinder first, and then you're going to count how many of those measurements are on the body of the cylinder. So what you're going to do is use your pencil with a straightened arm. So you have to actually lock your elbow, and you're going to take the pencil lead and go on the very back part of the top of the ellipse that you're seeing. Measure that with the tip of the pencil and take your thumb and put your thumb wherever the bottom part of that ellipse is. Then what you are going to do is attempt to count how many of those measurements there are on the tall vertical part, or what I call the body of the cylinder, are, in order to draw that cylinder more correctly. It's going to vary depending on how close you are to the cylinder, or if you're standing, if you're sitting, if you're slouching down in your seat. All of those things are going to matter as you try to draw this cylinder. And then the other thing that you should notice is the arc of the bottom of the ellipse and the arc of the very bottom of the cylinder should match. They should be exactly parallel with each other, as should the sides of the cylinder. Those sides should be completely parallel as they are vertical as well. So if we look here, I'm giving you some of the steps for the cylinder. The first thing that you want to do is orient your page vertically. The reason I'm telling you to do this is the cylinder is vertical, and it's going to be much easier to draw your cylinder on a vertical canvas because they will match. The second thing that you need to know is you should be drawing very lightly. We have talked about this before, but just to reiterate, you need to draw very lightly as you start. When you start the cylinder, you really should start with the ellipse at the top. So you're going to kind of start at the top of your page and work your way down. The sides of the cylinder, again, should be perpendicular to the table, and they should also be parallel to each other. And then we had talked about this just previously, that the bottom of the cylinder, that bottom arc, should match the bottom part of the ellipse that's at the top. What I'm getting at is this arc on the bottom of the ellipse and the very bottom of the cylinder, those two arcs should match. The next step is you should be creating a table line and a shadow in order to create something that is more photorealistic. This drawing, while it's not perfect, does have the table line and shadow. The next thing that you're going to do, number 7, is actually the longest step. You're going to create value on the entire cylinder in layers. You do need to use a very sharp pencil and a very crisp, brand new pencil eraser to make the edges between different parts of the objects. The sharp pencil will be used where you're creating darker values, and the crisp pencil eraser will be used where you're making really light edges. One other thing that you need to be aware of is you should be blending in a circular motion to create the most smooth value. After you have the steps, basically what you're going to be doing is creating a little bit of value each day. It is going to take you several days in order to create the entire cylinder drawing. Probably at least 2 class periods, and the same with the box in value. Just like we talked about before, in order to have the highest grade possible, you need to eliminate as many of the outlines from your drawing as possible. There should be no original outlines left because you're creating such sophisticated values that you don't see those original outlines anymore. If you can see an outline, you probably need to erase. So for example, this part that I have highlighted, the person would need to go and erase first and then go back with a blending stump to try to make those values without creating a line. Another thing that we need to talk about is that you should draw a diagram in your sketchbook or on another piece of paper so that you can compare your drawing with what the object should actually look like in space. What the instructor will do is they're going to create a diagram with numbered values, and that's why you actually numbered that stepped value scale in order to create different parts of your drawing. What I want you to notice about this drawing that's on the right-hand side is it's very hard to see the bottom of the cylinder from the table because they are the same value, and the same thing is happening with the top of the cylinder. There's too much value on both the top and the sides in order to see each edge perfectly in space. There will be examples in Google Drive that are also linked in the Canvas module for you to actually take a look at cylinders, boxes, and bags. It is best if you really look at the object in the classroom, but if you, for whatever reason, are going to be gone from class, you can of course use these, or if you feel that's a little bit easier for you, you can also go into the shared Google folders and use the different drawings that are in there. And there are even diagrams in there so that you can see what values you should be using to create those drawings. So here I'm wondering if you can tell me why boxes might be more complicated to draw than cylinders. And I'm actually talking about blocking in. When you're blocking in the box, why is that more complicated to draw than the cylinder? If you said it was because of all the angles and ratios and the parallelogram at the top, You were correct. What I want you to realize about the box is you're actually going to create the parallelogram that's at the top of the box first. That is technically why it's a little bit harder to draw the box than the cylinder. In addition, the boxes that are in the classroom are wrapped with paper, and there's going to be an X that creates the folds on the wrapping that you're going to have to draw as well. When I explain how to draw boxes with people, what I always try to have you do is compare the parallelogram at the top to an analog clock face. So if you take a look at this clock face, or even draw the clock face on your sketchbook really lightly, or maybe even on a different piece of paper, hopefully you can compare where the hour and minute hand are going to go in order to figure out where the parallelogram is on the box. After you get the parallelogram drawn, what you're going to do is draw 3 perpendicular lines that connect the box to the table, and then what you should see is that the bottom angles are parallel to the top part that you already drew. Specifically, it's the bottom 2 angles of the parallelogram should match the bottom 2 angles of the box itself. And then you can actually block in the shadow once you're done. So I'm wondering if you think that the parallelogram at the top of the box is always going to be the same, and why or why not. We talked about this a little bit with the cylinder, but I want to see if you can figure it out. Realistically, the parallelogram is going to change depending on how close you are to the box, or how tall you are, how straight you're sitting in your chair. All of that matters. I'm not saying that you have to have perfect posture. What I'm saying is that you really have to look at the box to be able to draw the parallelogram that you're seeing on the top of the box. The one thing that's really important is to actually get a parallelogram. You do not want to have only 2 sides to the box because you've slouched down so far in your seat. The problem with doing that is it often will not look like a box on a table, depending on how realistically you added the value for your drawing. Once again, you are going to need to draw a table line and a shadow so that your box looks more realistic, and then you're going to blend in light layers like we had talked about before. This image shows you a little bit about where the values might be going on the box. Now, depending on where the light source is, there's going to be a highlighted area that's lightest, and it's going to transition down to darker values on different parts of the piece. It's important for you to really scrutinize what you are seeing in the classroom. That is why we took photographs and we put them in a Google Drive folder for you, so that you could actually remove any of the color from what you're seeing in the classroom. Often, because we're using tungsten lights, they create a little bit of yellow, which actually distorts what you're seeing. So I went in Photoshop and I removed all of the color for you so that all you're seeing is things that are in black and white. It makes drawing the value a little bit easier. Again, you have to use a sharp pencil and a pencil eraser in order to create the edges of the box. The sharp pencil is used to create the darker edges of the box that you're seeing, and the pencil eraser would create the lighter edges of the parts of the box that you're seeing. You can use a blending stump here, but again, I want you to use caution, because sometimes if you press too hard with the blending stump, you create problems in your drawing. You may need to come in for enrichment to get some assistance with how to use blending stumps. You should draw a diagram in your sketchbook or on another piece of paper so that you can see where you might need to make improvements to your drawing. If for either one of these drawings the teacher is not available, you should move on to the next drawing. So if you are waiting for a diagram on your cylinder, you should move on to your box, and vice versa. If you're waiting for a diagram on your box, you could move on to the cylinder to create value, or you could be working on your digital portfolio. You should never be sitting doing nothing in class. So here's another question for you. I'm wondering why some of you might think I'm giving you the option of doing either a box or a bag in value. If you thought it was because I wanted to give you voice and choice about what was the most appropriate level for you to draw, you were right. Realistically, the box and the bag are both cubed-like structures. Technically, this bag is kind of like a pyramid, but it's not really an equilateral pyramid. But it does have flat edges like what a box is, which make them similar. The hard part of the bag is actually with the crinkles that are created, because I normally scrunch the paper bag and then put it back together so that you get some facets inside there. The most important part of drawing the bag, though, is you really want to get that check mark or that negative space between where the fold of the opening of the bag is and where you would put things into the bag are, that triangular section. So after you get that check mark area, the next thing that you're going to want to do is draw the parallelogram that is on the top surface of the bag. Some people actually like drawing the triangular part of the bag as well, that larger triangular part. That's fine as well. It doesn't really matter which part of the drawing you're drawing first, as long as you're really looking at the shapes and the sizes between different things. Hopefully you can see on this particular example, the bag was folded and it's almost in thirds. The opening of the bag is 1/3 of the other two sections of the bag. If you actually take your pencil, you could probably measure that. This is what I'm talking about. There's a check mark over here. There's also a check mark on this other side. And hopefully you notice the parallelogram that is actually on this larger surface of the bag. Then the person would probably draw the triangular part because those are easiest. And then you would go back and try to draw the opening of the bag. And hopefully you can see there's kind of an ellipse on the right-hand part where the opening is. It's really dark and it's hard to see on this image, but that is what's actually there in the classroom. As you create value on any of these drawings, it's really important to switch directions when you're creating value on different parts of the drawing. So for example, you might want to go diagonally when you are in the triangular section of the bag, and you might want to go the other diagonal, or actually it would almost be perpendicular to the first value that you created on the parallelogram surface. Again, it's highly recommended that you create a diagram for yourself. What's really important is for you to trace on a piece of printer paper what your drawing looks like, because the teacher may not have examples in the Google Drive folder. I believe there are some, but if you actually do one that's in class, you're going to have to take a photograph and then actually create the diagram for yourself. You'll trace all of the outlines, all of the shapes that you're seeing within the bag, and the teacher will go and help you create value numbers of the diagram for you. So if someone wasn't in class today, I'm wondering if you can summarize what we are trying to do, and perhaps one or two of you could give me the steps for either the cylinder, the box, or the bag. Once we've done that, I'm going to give you some time to start drawing those in your sketchbook.